resource partners in order to get companies where they need to be. Because a lot of times we just don't know where to go. There's so much information out there, but we can help. If you're a startup, we can point you to the right small business development center or the Apex guys, because we all work together. Next chart. Just more about the priorities. Next chart. Based on the first executive order that was signed by President Nixon, and now the law that President Biden has signed in November of 21, these are the ethnic groups that we work with based on those policies and orders to date. And so 2 eligibility requirements: being one of those ethnic groups and have at least $500,000 in revenue. Next chart. And this just talks about our alignment with MBDA's mission in the area we service. We service Virginia out the door, but we also we have companies across the United States in our portfolio. Then we got about 125 companies that we work with. I have 2 locations, primary locations in Fairfax. I have a secondary location in Richmond, co-located with the Carolina, Virginia Minority Supply Development Council, which I visit. I go there at least once a month and work out of that office. And I have collaborative agreements with Economic Development Office of Virginia Beach, the city of Virginia Beach. And I visit there also to include the peninsula and even all corners of the Commonwealth. Next chart. But this is, we're measured by these metrics. And before I forget, none of the services that we provide cost you any money. It's free. The service, the consultation is free. But what we ask is, if you believe we help you win a contract or secure some funding for bonding, that you let us report that to the Department of Commerce. And these are the metrics that they grade us on an annual basis. We just finished our 2nd year. We met or exceeded 5 of the 7. And so this year we'll get a pat on the back and be in their Century Club for MBDA. And if you want to reach out, we're here to serve is the bottom line. Next year. I think that should be it.
Great. If there's any questions, please feel free. Nothing seems to have come through. But certainly if something comes up, if you want to learn more about what Tommy's group provides, there's a lot of other resources out there. He mentioned some of the similar resource partners we have. The Virginia Apex accelerators, which are formerly the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, are helping companies. If you're just getting into business, some of those groups prefer you to get things set up first before they're not trying to help you get into business. They're trying to get you business typically after you've already existed. The Small Business Development Center network is a great place to start, and they're all over the country. Virginia also, the RSBDC runs an ICAP program, which is especially great for startups or people thinking about starting up, and as well as those who are in business but are trying to look at the customer discovery process, looking at new customers and figuring out, is there a market for what I'm thinking about developing? And they go through this process. As an ICAP is kind of a 3 to 4 week process with follow-on engagement with a counselor. It's free, but there's sort of a cohort mentality. They do these things in different groups every few months, virtual. So there's a lot of resources out there. We encourage you to look into that. Again, if you're not in Virginia, there's similar resources in groups in your state. So please look into that. And thank you, Tommy, for your participation. You stick around, and we'll, if there's any other questions that come through, we'll certainly be sure to share that. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share. Go ahead and get my questions here. I'm trying to get the other. There we go. Share screen. They make you run around here, don't they? Okay. All right. And like I said, I am I'm Robert Brook. I'm Director of Federal Funding at VIPC, and we're going to provide an overview of the federally funded Small Business Innovation Research and its sister program, a Small Business Technology Transfer Program. Today, it's going to go for about 45 minutes. We might run a little bit over the top of the hour, so we can leave some Q&A at the end here. Might run a little over the full hour here we had anticipated. So, as you know, today's August 10th, 2023. The programs are always changing. So if you're viewing this as a recording sometime later, note that some of the things we discuss about timelines and maybe some, the agencies occasionally just tweak their programs all the time, which is why we give these classes, so people understand that there's not just one program, there's many programs based on federal agencies that participate their need. Our program at VIPC, just the two other programs we provide, we have a seed fund that we make actual investments in high growth potential companies. We've got, typically up to $200,000 investment in typically in an earlier stage seed round. And then we have a couple of funds that are smaller rounds focusing on underserved regions in Virginia, as well as underrepresented demographics, women and minority owned companies. So the bottom line is, if you're looking for venture capital, and we're going to talk about where SBIR fits in the scheme of these other funding sources, investment funding, loans and that sort of thing, and why SBIR, where SBIR fits in that. But if you want to learn more about our investment funds, the links there are available. And we also hold every 2 weeks, our investment team hosts a free bi-weekly virtual coffee hour, talks, kind of all things investment. They sometimes have guest speakers from investors and other entrepreneurs. Sometimes there's panels, sometimes there's specific topics. So a neat thing, if you're starting to look for outside venture capital, or you're thinking of it, the best laid plan is to learn about that. And that's a good session to do that. So take a look at that and we'll learn more. Our Commonwealth Commercialization Fund is a grant fund. Again, only Virginia companies can apply for this. You've got to be headquartered in Virginia. They've got restrictions on how much of the ownership is based in Virginia, and a couple other things. But we're providing up to $100,000 grants to help companies and also university researchers further develop their technology. So these are technology development. This is all technology, software, hardware, medical, IT, cybersecurity, anything you list, but it's not to fund, brick and mortar companies, so to speak, meaning that they're selling, the coffee shop or the bagel shop, or you're looking to develop a printing company. That hits to help develop the technology. So that said, our CCF grant link there, and take a look at that. There are restrictions and matching requirements for that, but take a look at that if you're interested and learn more. They also participate in our investor coffee hours. And at the end of that, they're an hour and a half long. The last half hour is dedicated to breakout rooms. So you can kind of do in a breakout room and engage with our grants team or our investment team or one of the other speakers that are there. And that's something to think about. So then the support I provide is for helping companies here in Virginia learn about and understand SBIR. Today's event is the true beginning of that, as an intro session. We provide training, mentoring. I typically work with a company several hours on the phone to kind of go over what they're doing, to see if there's a fit, follow up with an email, hopefully get them to a more in-depth training class. We'll talk about that a little bit. And what, if they are fit and they've done the right training and they're doing the right things to kind of move their technology along, whether that be engaging with the agency with some questions. We have a small grant that we could possibly deploy after an application sent to you and received back to us that could help provide up to $3,000-4,000 depending on the phase that you're applying to, as well as there's some restriction. We have a little additional funding for women and minority-owned companies to bring that up to about $4,000 or so. So depending on your level, we have the discussion that it might be available to you. And we do pretty well here in Virginia. We're typically ranking 3rd in the country in awards. I'm working with over 400 companies a year through training and one-on-one mentoring and proposal development grants. Over $200 million of SBIRs are coming into the Commonwealth. So that's a good thing. And that's why they're having me do what I do, is to get federal grant money into the Commonwealth of Virginia. Whereas the other funding mechanisms I told you about are actual Virginia money. So that said, so the charter of the SBIR, it was mandated by Congress, and there was an original pilot program run by the National Science Foundation and over 40 years ago. The current reauthorization, these things have been going, they've been reauthorized for 3-year, 5-year stints. They're always getting reauthorized. And typically when they get reauthorized, there's some grandstanding, if you will, certain changes are proposed to make this thing a little bit more, depending on what the flavor of the day is on interest from different congressional members. But it's a great program. It's one of the most successful programs, I think, in the history of the government as far as what it's doing for small business. And the goal is to stimulate technological innovation, develop, use the small business environment here in the United States to meet the federal research and research development needs, encourage participation in socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses, and those that are 51% owned and controlled by women in technological innovation. And they've actually expanded that to women, minority-owned companies as well. Increase private sector commercialization of innovations derived from federal research and development, increasing competition and productivity and economic growth. So it's an economic development program that the government created to help small businesses who are generally not ready for other funding sources, for them to be the true original funding mechanism for early stage, high potential technology development. So, SBIR is a part of a funding strategy. There's 3 main sources of funding: debt. So you are bank loans, you're borrowing money from somebody, you owe it back, maybe with interest. Equity, you're getting investors, whether that be a seed investor, an angel investor, or true venture capital, and it's diluting the amount of company you own personally. So there's a loss there. And there's non-dilutive, meaning it's like the grant we have that we run at VIPC, but this is also the SBIR program. You don't lose any equity. In fact, you're gaining intellectual property and other data rights, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But this is that true funding source that's supposed to help you then get more attractive to those other sources that are above it there. So think of it as usually the earliest funding that a company would get to develop their high risk but high payoff technology. If you've already got money, you've already developed the technology, and you need looking for money to scale it up and do sales, that's not SBIR. And we have a little more information about that. The goal is to provide that critical early seed funding. Again, like I just said, where you're too early for the other funding sources, whether it be the banks and investors and venture capital and strategic partner funding. And it's going to lower the risk for those other larger funding sources. That's sort of how it goes. The earlier the investor, the bigger the risk, and typically the smaller amount of money that's going into it to validate. And it's what we say, it's answering that come back when you've got customers, come back when you've got revenue, come back when you're selling this thing. You're like, well, that's what those other folks are looking for. SBIR funds that before it's a comeback when. The cool idea over towards product. Now, we always hear about that valley of death. And that's really where SBIR is coming in. You might have early preliminary data you've discovered. You have you're doing consulting, and everybody's saying the same thing over and over, and you realize you maybe develop a tool to maybe solve that problem, but not sure if it's going to work. And so you could have other revenues. You could be in university, that early discovery of foundational research in a university setting where you're getting some early grants. And then when you come out, it's like, you became real hot. No one wants to touch you because, well, this is just a 2-person company. They're not selling anything yet, and it's an idea. So that's where the valley of death really is for SBIR, getting you through the development cycle of your earliest stage technology development. 3 phases. 2 of these have SBIR money, and the 3rd phase is other money, right? So phase 1 is going to be feasibility, or what they call proof of concept, 6 months to a year in time frame, generally speaking, anywhere from $75K to 295,000. We can talk about what that 75 is. That's actually a lower, pretty low. Most of them are between 150,000 and the 295 for that phase one. I'll mention later what the DoD is doing to provide these smaller grants. And the phase two is typically $500,000 up to $2 million. Again, depending on the agency, the phase twos vary greatly. Some of the larger agencies obviously provide more money because they have more money. And the smaller ones are trying to conserve their resources and get as many awards as possible. We'll talk about who participates and where their budgets are. And then the phase three, you get through phase one and you get a phase two, and that's going to be 2 to 3 years of time. But getting to phase three, the government wants there to be results, and they want to track. So they call it phase three. There's a couple of reasons why they do phase three. Phase three, they want to know that you're getting it sold. They want to know if you're going to be getting, you're selling it back to the government, or you're getting actual product sales by selling it commercially to the real world. You're getting investors maybe down the road. They want to call that all phase three, showing that their money is moving towards getting the technology that they took the early risk on to deployed. The other concept of phase three would be selling your SBIR technology to the government. There's some preferences you get. You have what they call a sole source position. The day you win a phase one SBIR, we have a slide on this later, but you have a contract vehicle that you can secure other follow-on business with at any other federal agency based on the work you're doing in that SBIR at, say, a Department of Defense. You can go to the post office. If they've got something they liked what you did there, they can actually provide you a contract without putting it out on the street. So there's a long talk about that we give in another session, but I figured I'd say that early on to kind of keep you hanging on and listening on this. So what do you need? Okay, so maybe not everybody on the call today has a business yet, or you're thinking of maybe you're working somewhere else and you want to maybe split off and start your own company, but you don't know when you're going to do that. So you have to have a small business to apply. Doesn't mean you have to have the business up and running, but you have to have a business formed. You could be working somewhere else. And when you apply for an SBIR, all the things you put in it would be at time of award, this is what I'm going to be. So you have to get the right people and the right control. So the ownership has to be US owned and controlled. So you can't be owned by a foreign company, even if they're friendly company, foreign countries. Must be US owned and controlled, and more than 50% owned by US citizens or permanent residents here. So it has to be less than 500 employees, which we always say that's a pretty big company, but in all in, there's a lot of large companies that are bigger than that. So this is dedicated. The average size company winning SBIRs is about 10 to 15 employees. So some agencies prefer the larger companies. Some of them, we'll talk about that a little bit later, what their preference is. But generally speaking, small companies are not average 400 people winning these things. It's usually about 10 to 15 employees. All the work must be performed in the US. The company must be located in the US. So you can't outsource $1, 1 dime, 1 penny to another state. Or another country. You have to do all here. If you need to purchase equipment or some sort of resources, you have to purchase that through another company, a distributor of that in the US. The lowest bid is not winning these. You're trying to. They want to spend this money on the US and the US economy. So if there's another company that's already distributing something that you need from another country, you can't buy it directly from that country to buy it through a distributor. Anyhow, that's what their goal is. All must be in the US, and you're going to have some sort of company controlled space for research for that project. We have a little more discussion on that particular thing later. To apply for an SBIR or STTR, you need, we said, a small business, an address, and a company bank account, not your personal bank account. Get a company bank account set up. That's going to be a good thing to do. You have to do a lot of registrations as well to apply these things, federal registrations, set up different things, and that's going to all be part of that process. Again, you could be full-time employed at a large company or in the government, but when you get this money, that will have to change, right? If you get the award, you're gonna have to change that stuff. To receive the SBIR, you got to have the right people that you propose to be the best team you can think of to develop this, to perform the research you proposed. Right facilities. After COVID, everybody thinks they can do everything virtually. Not necessarily. They have to be secure, the appropriate place to do the work. If you're doing beakers and need to light up some things, get in your garage. Is your cat and your dog going to knock over your work and step on your keys on your computer? And so they're still looking at things that you got to be looking to grow your company. If you're a startup, they want to see that you're trying to become a bigger, more established startup and get towards a larger company. And they tend to want you to have some sort of business address if you win this, and your rent is an allowable cost, right? So you can put that and get paid for it. So those is, and other resources. Again, we talk a lot more about these things in the more in-depth workshops we provide, but this is not for the one person to apply to do all the work and get all the money in their garage themselves. So you want to be expanding, acknowledging any weaknesses, put yourself in the reviewer's shoes, and think about it. The project team, they're going to need all the experience for project success, well-defined roles. So these are proposals between 10 to 12, 6 pages at NIH and 20 to 25 pages at some other agencies. But you're going to have time to explain who's on the team, what their backgrounds are, what are their roles on this project, are they appropriate roles based on the person's background, well-defined scope, and we want to get these complementary skills that sort of make a good, well-rounded team. Some of these things can be TBD. There has to be a principal investigator identified. That is the only person that has to be listed by name, mandatory. And that person has to be full-time employed at the company at time of award. So that person is managing the project scientifically and technically. They're usually going to be on it, minimum 10%, but some agencies have higher standards than that. And then other people to do work as well. We'll talk about how much you can outsource later. Advisors, do you have an advisory board? This is where you really come to start looking at mentors and advisors that have other skills and Rolodexes, so to speak, that you can tap into at the appropriate time. They're not really on the project, but they're at your company's disposal at some point. Outside consultants and subcontractors, these are all part of a project team. These are the kind of roles, not to go into too much depth, but there's technical people, there's going to be people that are doing the business side, the customer discovery, the development of that, the IP. Do you have a law firm on retainer, or do you have someone you want to talk to? Regulatory, is there going to be a regulatory pathway required if you're doing more life science and biotech and drug development, other things like that? Is there somebody who's familiar with fundraising? Most of these agencies, particularly the ones, if it's non-DOD or not, the goal isn't to sell to the government, but to sell to the real world, you're going to have some level of discussion of the other monies you're going to need. When the government money runs out, typically the product's not 100% developed. There's other things you're going to continue to get outside capital to fully develop. So fundraising. It could be a TBD later, but they like to see that there's somebody there, maybe an advisor that's been through that process. And of course, management, administration, bookkeeping, all those sorts of things. So this is where we talk about a little bit about the PI, the primary investigator. They have to be at least 50% of their professional effort at the company at the time of the award. So sometimes a professor is looking to maybe leave the university, they can't do that and be on this and get an SBIR until they get the project, but then they're going to be full-time at the company. They're not going to be, like I said, always doing all the work. There might be other stuff that they're going to be doing in the company, or is there other ways to get paid? So that's the person that has to be listed. But you could be saying, well, we're going to need 3 programmers, and I can probably access these. They're pretty much a dime a dozen. We could find them. They don't have to list these people by name. But if there's other people on the project that are going to be key people that are going to be integral, they've got great backgrounds, and you want to list them by name, and they're dedicated and letter of support to be on the project, you can do that. So you got to have, like I said, company controlled space, research. It's got to be research kind of oriented space, suitable to do the work proposed. A lot of people are doing a lot of IT work, and you can do things on laptops and computers. But is that the way to grow a big company down the road? So phase 1 is often okay to do that, unless you need other space. You can rent some space to do certain work. There's some, the co-working spaces where you don't have they want you to be able to lock a door, right? And while you can probably do that at your house, most people don't install a lock on their bedroom door or their office door. Some do, but that's sort of going to be a little bit suspect, especially when it gets to the follow-on phase 2 stage. Something to talk about. We can have a discussion about what your situation is, what you're doing, and we can see from there. Again, it's suitable to do the proposed work. And like I said, you can have multiple locations. You're going to have, when you register in the federal database, you're going to have an address. That can be your home address. If you move, you have to change that. But sometimes companies come and go quicker than your home address goes. But anyhow, that's just some food for thought there. These are ways to make, especially if you're a startup doing this, ways to make your team, more attractive to work with. The more questions they have, I always say that agencies, reviewers look for reasons not to fund you before they look for reasons to fund you. They don't seem like they're established. They're all working from different states, and it seems weird that they don't have an office anywhere, given the work they're proposing to do. And they don't have any IP. There's no intellectual property discussion. They don't have a lawyer on staff. There's no advisors. They have no advisory board. These are just ways as a startup, if you can try to get some of these things, it's plugging the holes in the in the dam, so to speak, to let them make a decision on your actual technology you're proposing, right? It's just sort of a ghosting the reviewers, they said. You kind of pretend knowing what they're going to predict, what they're going to ask for, and you can answer those before they have the question. What does SBIR fund? Okay, so university researchers are developing new technology, and they take it from there, and other people come on and develop. They're discovering new things, and then the other people discovered, and it's an eternal discovery phase. SBIR is for product development. It's not for you to do consulting. It's not for you to just to discovery of new thought, right? That you can then continue to do more work on, and there's no product, right? It needs to be a product, hardware, software, and it can be a service, right? But it's got to be a critical service that needs research, and it can be performed in a research environment. Based on technological innovation, there's got to be something that you're not quite sure is going to work. That's the concept of the phase 1, is a feasibility study. That you need to put some parameters in your research plan, how it's going to be measured, what would success look like, and perform those research plans and measure your results at the end, so that you can say, look, either we did or didn't exceed it, and there's a minimum level here. Whereas you get the follow-on money, you can still be developing more and add more data points to grow it out, but the minimum level of feasibility has been proven. It doesn't mean it's 100% going to work yet, but the biggest hurdle of technical risk has been passed. That's what they're looking at. At the same time, which is sometimes a challenge for true technologists that maybe haven't run a business before, they have to understand the market that they're targeting, whether it be the federal agency, like a DoD is going to be the end goal of selling to. You got to learn that process. If it's going to be selling in the commercial world, who wants this? Why do they want it? You got to, what customers, what's the value proposition that you present the customers if compared to what they're buying now and what you're proposing to be developing? Does anybody want it? Some agencies like the NSF want you to get letters of support from at least one critical key customer that can validate that there's a need for what you're developing, right? So there's this customer discovery, understanding of the market, and how you would even get it there. And there's different business models for commercialization, whether it's licensing, or just trying to build it all yourself. You build some of it, you license some of it, the different models, and those can all be discussed as valid models, but you want to have a good plan discussed. So there always got to be a product. You have to understand what the intended use of the products are going to be. Making sure you understand the market as best you can of what your customers really need, the problem it's solving. Like I said, the value proposition. You really understand the end user and the customer. There's a program the NSF put together called ICOR. This is like a 3-month program for just customer discovery and business development initiatives, and they want these people that originally came out of the university, so they wanted the researcher and a business person outside the university to do up to 100 interviews from potential customers before they see if there's a there for this technology to think about developing. 100. That ICAP program here we run in Virginia, that's ICAP, Innovation Commercialization Assistance Program. They typically, they want at least 10 interviews from potential customers. Again, it's to figure out, is there a need? Do you really understand the customer? So those are great tools and a good models to understand and think about, because if you can't talk about the customer, the pathway, why they want it, who's going to buy it, you can have the best technology discussion in your project, but if there's no credible discussion of the market, it's not going to get funded. Understanding what you've done to date, the preliminary work, and what do you really need else to do? Like I said earlier, if you've already got most of it developed, you really don't need three years of R&D. What you're thinking, you're not just building a simple app to get on the iTunes store to start selling. $3 a pop, in 3 months, right? This is multi-year development of hard to solve problems that require, $1 million or more to develop over that time. That's the mindset you've got to have. So a couple of different SBIR and STTR we mentioned. This is the only slide I'll talk about, and go over a couple other points as well. Both SBIR and STTR allow for you to outsource some of the funds to outside your company, to other small businesses, large businesses, universities, again, also be in the US. The STTR requires that you partner with a nonprofit research institution or university, nonprofit university. And in an STTR, they have to do at least 30% of the work, and they can do up to 60%. That's 60. So if whereas with SBIR, you're allowed to outsource up to about 1/3 of the money, and but you don't have to. You could all internally. You can do it all internally, or the key is there that not to go. Let me do an STTR because I think that'll be looked at better. If you don't have relationships with the university, you don't know how they work, you don't know people there at all, you don't come from that university, you don't know. It's hard to develop these relationships in a short amount of time to apply for some of these opportunities. So that said, don't force it just so you think it's going to look better. You can partner with other small businesses and other organizations. Don't force fit it, right? The PI, the principal investigator, has to be employed, like I said, more than 50% of the time. At an STTR, that PI can be employed at either the university, or the nonprofit research institution, or the company, but not at the National Science Foundation. So I always suggest you make sure that with your PI consideration, depending on what agency you're looking at, make sure they're okay with that PI's employment status, depending where they are. Because not all agencies have STTR. We'll talk about that in a second. This, talks about the next slide, work requirement. You can outsource up to 1/2 in the phase 2, up to 1/3 in the phase 1. In the same requirements are in the STTR for the phase 2 as well for STTR. The program size. So how much money are we talking about here? Well, there's over $4 billion, right? So the numbers right here are a little bit old, but it's 3.2% of the, so as budgets go up, this money, the amount of money in this program goes up. As budgets might go down, these budgets can be crunched as well. If you're majority owned by venture capital, there's only a few agencies. The NIH is the one I know primarily, will allow you to be still eligible in SBIR. It has to be at least 2 investors. You can't have one key investor owning more than half the company. But that was pretty much only NIH is allowing that, because a lot of things that take a lot more time in drug development, other biotechnology stuff, takes a lot longer, and they see the companies are still proposing new innovative ideas that would be great for society, and if they get ineligible and no one else is proposing that, then they weren't eligible. So now they've made that allowable. But again, make sure that the agency or your situation is appropriate. So there's 11 agencies that do SBIR, and there's only 5. Actually, I think there's 6 now. I can't remember. There's a third one. The smaller ones are doing that. I think it's USDA, I think, or EPA. I can't remember now. So they're if they have over $100 million extramural R&D money they spend for R&D outside of the organization or their department, their agency, they have to by law participate in SBIR. So that's 11 agencies. If it's over $1 billion, then they have to participate in STTR as well. And there's only, like I said, 5 agencies. We have a listing here in a couple minutes here of who those agencies are. So 3.2%, sort of recap. Over 5,000 new projects are funded annually. So there's a lot of projects being funded. So to recap, these are early stage grants and contracts. We'll talk about the differences in some of the agencies, what that means. To gated, they're giving small awards over a relatively small amount of time to vet the high risk, but high payoff nature of what you're proposing. And it's gated, so they're trying to be good stewards of all of our taxpayer dollars, meaning if you can't prove it's going to even be feasible in the first phase, let's not give them all their money and then tell us it's not even, there's no way it's going to work. So it's a gated funding process. Commercialization or transition to the agency focus, so we call commercialization all of that, but it's not just to continue your research and development fund. It has to be producing. There's got to be ways, credible plans, and commercialization goals. Again, thinking economic development, that's kind of what the agencies want to use this program for you to solve big problems, sell lots of technology, lots of customers, make lots of money, and pay more taxes. The taxes go back in the coffers to fund the program. So that's kind of it. And the agencies, the larger agencies typically have more than one opportunity per year. Some of the bigger ones have 3. The little ones have 1. But almost a quarter of all seed capital in the U.S. is via this program. So pretty incredible. So here's the agencies by name. This is updated from 2022. I got to go back, fix that other slide. DoD is the big guy here, $2.25 billion almost. Health and Human Services, which includes the National Institutes of Health and CDC, they are over $1 billion now, $1.25 billion. Energy is over 300, almost 320 million. NASA is over 215 million now, and the NSF, National Science Foundation, is over 231 million. So those agencies all do SBIR and STTR, and the bottom ones just do, the smaller ones do, but I think USDA may be doing STTRs now. So anyhow, the USDA, Homeland Security, Department of Commerce, which includes NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, are both within Commerce. Department of Transportation, Department of Education, and the Environmental Protection Agency have a very small program. And this just gives you a sense for where the solicitations and announcements are taking place. The goal is, I think, after you figure out maybe one or two agencies that might be a fair target for you, to learn about their schedules. Most of them post when they come out. This is a good, this is not exact. Perhaps things change and shift from month to month, but this is a good idea that there's always something coming and going or currently open. So we talked about the user. Some of the agencies vary. There's two kinds of agencies: the ones that want to be the buyer of the technology they're funding, thinking DoD and NASA, for example, or the user agencies, which are generally contracting, kind of, they want to give you a contract eventually to buy your technology. They're going to be writing more specific topics because they understand their problem. They're asking for some people to solve a particular problem. Some of this you can use to suggest new topics to these guys, and there's some new programs that DoD has where there's opportunity for you to present your idea to them. We'll talk about that in a little bit at the end. I've got a slide on DoD. But these are the user, you're becoming the traditional government contractor. When you're selling to NASA or DoD, you got to be ready to learn their lingo, attend the conferences, learn who the other larger prime contractors are that you're going to be maybe working with and having to work with and sell through, becoming, like I said, a government contractor. And the other agencies that don't purchase it, these are like the National Science Foundation or NIH, for example. They're going to be the non-user. They're not going to be buying the technology that they're funding for you to develop. So they don't have boots on the ground or missions in space. They've just got missions to solve. So you're going to be talking commercial market primarily, and sometimes the granting agencies like NSF and NIH might have that sort of a higher bar for what the level of innovation needs to be big, higher risk level. And sort of that big innovation and technical hurdle is usually a lot bigger for those agencies compared to the DoD and NASA, where they're explaining what they need. It may not be the giant leap there that NSF is looking for, but it might be great for NASA, that something they've been trying to improve on something for a while. All right. So 10 to 20% success rate doesn't sound great, but it's not too bad considering not everybody's going to get venture capital. Not everybody's a fit for venture capital. It's going to take a year sometimes to try getting attractive to venture capital. Plus, at the stage you're at applying to, it's pretty early. There usually, if you can get venture capital, great. But there's strings attached to that money. I often can think that those rates are with companies that haven't done the appropriate training. Haven't really done that good customer discovery and fully understand what the opportunity they're proposing is. These are some companies that are examples of awardees. These are some of I think the NIH and NSF winners. 23andMe, Symantec, and Qualcomm. They were funded originally by the NSF's SBIR program. Sonicare used one this morning. And so these are examples of big companies are paying lots of taxes now to go back into the coffers, so to speak. NASA, this is the Mars 2020 Perseverance. These are all NASA technologies from SBIR, that tiny little things they develop. As you can see, the scope is develop a better lens or a laser micro imager. Very specific things they're looking for that these companies propose. Obviously they had to be experts in some areas here, but they're proposing new technology that had to withstand the rigors of travel and space deployment. So interesting to see that, where you can see some of this, like, oh, the 23andMe, the stuff, but then there's like, oh, a something ingrained in one part, a sensor within this rover. So depending on what your agency is, what success is, right? So cool perks. I'll kind of in the home stretch here. This is not a loan, so you do not owe the money back. You develop intellectual property that you maintain the IP retention for. The government, you get a 20-year data rights protection from the government. From the day you win it, you have 20 years where they cannot give it to anybody, right? And they have some internal use of it, they say, but they can't give it to anybody else. And I can't give it to Lockheed to develop your cool idea. They cannot do that. So this is a pretty good program. And as I mentioned to you earlier, it gives you that phase 3 sole source opportunity down the road to further develop get other contracts. If they, get them to like you, love you, know you, trust you, great things can be done in a lot of directions. I just put this slide in here for your university. This program can be used if you're a university researcher, you're spinning out. There's different ways and parameters, but just some food for thought of startup funding, your career goals, and where the PI can be and can't be. But also there's obviously you have the conflicts of interest have to be discussed if you're staying at the university. STTRs are allowed, but you can't just fund all your lab with all this work. It's got to be there's the business gets the money. So just something to think about there. Find topics. SBIR.gov is the main website. You can have links to all the agencies. It's a pretty workable site. You can do searches for current open topics. You can go to each of the agency sites to kind of, I would suggest signing up. If you figure out DoD is a target, get on their listserv so they can let you be notified when theirs comes out. You can also look at old awards to find out maybe who funded what I'm thinking about in the past. And sometimes there's going to be 3 or 4 or 5 agencies that might have interest in from what they funded in the past, what you might be looking now. Where do I look? Where do I spend my valuable time to help maybe develop some new connections and do research on potential opportunities that might come around. So these are SBIR.gov is a great source for you. It's part of a funding strategy. It's there's going to be times when you think it's going to be a long road. And what I sometimes explain is there's when you're presenting, if you're early in your technology, but you think you've done some development work and you might be wanting to maybe seek some seed capital, which is really what they call America's Seed Fund, but there could be private seed capital from a venture capital perspective or angel investors, right? And what those investors are normally looking at is for you to tell them how much you've done, how much how little risk there really is, but there's some risk, but very little risk. Where you can have the technology, the same level of development, but to apply for SBIR, you're telling them how much you don't know, what the risk level of, I have to prove this works, or it's really probably not going to work to the level that customers are going to need it to work. We call that the gray line. You can kind of dial it back, up and down based on who you're applying to, but you're not lying. But it's a matter of you have to focus on with SBIR, all the things you don't know and the risk level there is. There has to be enough risk, has to be enough stuff you don't know to warrant getting the SBIR phase 1. And if you go SBIR route, particularly at the DoD, you're not going to make an entire company product line out of one SBIR. They're very focused. Ultimately, they're not that lucrative. Ultimately, government contracting, but it can lead to other things, and you're developing a cadre of technologies perhaps through the program. Bottom line is tell your story. Every story is unique. They like to fund good stories. They like to fund people that have passion, have backgrounds and experience that they're bringing to the technology development and to solve the missions of the agency they're targeting. So you just tell the story. Don't have other consultants write your proposals, because that passion just doesn't come out like some agencies like to see. If you do win, congratulations, but you got to be prepared for growth with audits, project management systems and processes, timekeeping, cybersecurity requirements. This is not just for SBIRs. This is going to be for any federal contracts you might get, but particularly with a startup or your first SBIR, you may not have done that stuff before. Just to be aware and to help think about this stuff a little bit earlier than you may think you need to. And just food for thought. It does cover, you get a 7% fee generally. Some agencies have more, some agencies a little bit less, but you can ask for that. And that's profit in your bank account. Or if you underestimate a cost of certain things, and they're not going to give you more money, so you need to pay for something out of your own pocket if you need to finish this project and you don't have any more money in the project to change scope for, that money can be used for that. But rent, benefits, accounting systems, payroll, these are all included in your rates, whether you're direct or indirect rates, your overheads. So don't go cheap. Obviously cost conscious, but it's not, this is setting you up to become a real company, with real systems and processes. And if you don't have that, if you don't think you need to do that, you're not going to be a good candidate. Couple things we've got. I'm going to have a discussion here, quick, short little overviews of 3 agencies, and then we'll look at the questions that have come through. We've got workshops. I provide over a dozen training workshops and webinars a year that provide more opportunity to learn the specifics of an agency you might be targeting. We've got live workshops coming up in Fairfax and Norfolk coming up in a few weeks for the Department of Defense. We actually have some of those agencies coming. We've got NASA coming, NOAA, Defense Logistics Agency, NAVSEA, and someone else. But they're not all coming to both of those. So let me know. You can look at our website and I'll be sending everybody the follow-up here, and I'll include information about those events. And the recordings, we do larger 4 to 5 or 6 hour long webinars on some agencies, and we've got recordings available at the link below. Virginia companies get access to those at no cost. There's some small fees for non-Virginia based companies. Well worth it to see if this is something that will help pay your business for the next 10 to 15 years. And the live workshops have a small fee, $25, I think, for Virginia companies, and like $75 for non-Virginia. So while seats last. So a little bit of this is my contact information. We'll be sending everybody these slides. And if there's any questions about, wanting to talk about the other programs we have at VIPC, want to talk about your company and SBIR. Again, Virginia-based companies only, please. We don't have enough time to work with that. But if you go to the SBIR.gov website, there's a link for state resources, and you can find resources for your state. This is a U.S. program. Not other countries cannot participate. You have to be, all work must be done in the U.S. and you have to be controlled in the U.S. So that said, that's my contact info. And this, I'm just going to go over this so you can get the understanding of how the agencies differ in flavor. NIH, we call them National Institutes of Health, most flexible probably. They allow the PI to be from, the university on their STTRs. You can exceed the funding caps. People have applied for $1 million phase ones. They've gotten those. So there are, you can exceed those caps if you by request. They don't have topics. You discuss what you think the market needs, and so it's investigator initiated in their omnibus solicitation. They've got 3 cycles, and when one closes, the other opens, right? So it's just constantly an opportunity out there. They have no cost extensions. There's no one waiting to buy your technology in the government. So if you needed more time to your phase 1, things were slower for some reason, you're not going to be in default. So that no cost extensions. They actually have direct to phase 2s. A lot of agencies now, DoD has them and NIH has them, where you can apply for the phase 2. If you've done the phase 1 work already on your own dime, maybe some other you can show the work you've done, and now you need the money to help further develop it based on the needs of the institute or the agency, you can apply for that. And as I said, you can have more than 50% ownership by outside venture capital, for example. Must be more than one investor though. This is at NIH. And note that other agencies do fund things that NIH funds, NSF, DoD, NASA, for example. So a lot of opportunity. And these are the institutes. They fund by institute at the NIH. at HHS. So you're going to be, each of these institutes have their own budget, and a different, some are larger like the NCI, National Cancer Institute, and some are very small. So, but you would be getting funded by one of these institutes. So you got to kind of do your homework and know where you're targeting. So the NSF, National Science Foundation, they were the originator of the program over 40 years ago. They want you to be doing significant technical R&D to overcome challenging technical hurdles in the creation of a new product or service. They love startups. They love two-person companies. They want you to have a unique and defensible technical innovation that has promises to create a durable competitive advantage for your farm. They want you to show that you are a dedicated entrepreneur, right? That's not something else you're also doing, right? This is your focus. They want this to be 100% of your focus. Aggressive commercialization discussion. If you don't have people on your team that have done it before, commercialized, sold technology, get them, because they're not going to read well for NSF proposal. They really look at this, and they have what they call they want a true understanding of the market and the customers indicating need. The PI is never allowed to be from the university, because they would say, well, if the PI who understands the technology maybe the most isn't handcuffed to the company, how are investors going to come in, right? So they have a process that no one else has. They want to do a project pitch. You submit this project pitch. It's like 5 pages of stuff about the innovation, the opportunity, the market, your team. And it's a sort of a snippet of the opportunity, so they can give you the thumbs up that you have the approval to submit a proposal over the next 1 year from that date of approval. Or no, you didn't pass muster here. Don't worry about, they'll tell you kind of why. They don't have topics as well. But they have these bucket areas, and then one of those bucket areas, they have health IT, they've got advanced manufacturing, they have a lot of different heading categories. You just kind of figure out where you fit, and then one of those categories is also called other. So they really fund almost anything, and which is great. And they have 3 cycles that they call them windows. So they refer to them as, you can submit in the middle of the window, and maybe you'll get reviewed before the end of the window scrape, when they put them all together and then start doling them out. If they get enough proposals in a certain area in the middle of the time, that 3 or 4 month period, they can review it. So they don't have any directive phase 2s. So you do not have that. And they actually give a really neat, every couple of weeks, their own overview of their program called they call it, I think, Office Hours Intro to America's Seed Fund webinar. Go to that link there, and it's free. They do a 30-minute overview of their program and the process, and then they do 3 minutes of Q&A. They fund anything there. I for so many companies there. They don't all win, but they have a big appetite for lots of different kinds of technologies. DoD, this is the final one. Very different. They've got half the budget, right? They have 3 main broad agency announcements per year. And when they post these things in what they call a pre-solicitation for 1 month, and then they're open for submission for 1 month. So not a lot of time to kind of do a lot of homework. So I always suggest, if you're looking at DoD, eventually start writing down contacts and doing that sort of a search their awards database to see who's funded what in the past, and what departments funded these, and are there conferences where I can meet these people and hear from them, either online or go to the conference, so I can start learning at Army and Navy and the Air Force who might be possible users or topic creators of things that I might have to respond to pretty quickly, but not start from ground zero. That's just food for thought. AFCEA, NDIA, these guys all have virtual and in-person conferences all over the country. In the DC area, they've got great chapters. Some of the agencies have gone what they call off topic. So they're going to not participate in those 3 BAAs that are open for just 2 months each, but they're going to do whenever they need it. DARPA started this process, and now Even Army's doing some of these. And they've gone also to the Air Force created a program called AFWorks, and the other entities are now being required to do this too within the DoD, these open topics. Now, AFWorks is the SBIR arm of the Air Force. And so what they've done is create these, 3 to 4 month project with a small amount of money to kind of scatter shoot ideas that you come up with that would have a clear stakeholder need within the Air Force, for example. The Navy now has one, has some vertical categories. DARPA is going to be coming up with one. They've all been required to do this, and they're doing them soon. So I would get on their websites to look at these and see when they come out, because there could be interesting opportunities that you are able to write the topic for, essentially, but you have to understand more about their use of it. If you respond to a topic, you don't need to do that, because they're the people that write the topic are generally the ones who will hopefully buy it down the road. So anyhow, just food for thought. Keep an eye on these things. Note that DoD is transition oriented. They want to be the buyer. They want you to understand the pathway to them, which is not going to be directly to them a lot of times. It's going to be through their program of record that some other larger primes are part of. And you got to be engaging with these guys, the primes, to test some things. And when you end of phase 2, you're going to still need another year or 2 of development and validation and testing, and you got to find that money from somewhere. Sometimes partnerships can do that. So that's a whole long game of development for DoD technology that not everybody has the appetite for, but it could be the government needs it. So that said, that is all I have, and I want to go ahead and look at the Q&A. So anybody can, hopefully, only Virginia companies can participate in my services, but certainly, as I mentioned to you, you can find the services from other states. Go to SBIR.gov and find their state resources. For the CCF fund, does company have to be? Yes, they have to be located in Virginia. They want the company to be headquartered here. Majority of the C-level execs, they want them to be in Virginia, and or ownership. Majority ownership needs to be in Virginia. There's some discussion you can have if you've got multiple offices, but they also have to look at ownership. And that does require one-to-one matches to waived in-kind salaries and other ways to develop that technology. Can non-technical service-based businesses qualify for funding too? So maybe. You're developing a tool. You have to be developing a software or a hardware, or what is it the agency wants. I mean, if the DoD has they want to develop new methods and maybe training methods for soldiers in arid environments, and you have ideas to do this. Maybe it's not developing software, but it's an actual training techniques or something, maybe, or therapy. Maybe it's psychotherapy techniques or something that there's no tool. But generally, it's not going to be for consulting, right? You can, if you do consulting, you want to develop a tool that only you have, or you can license it to other consultants. That might be a tool. Does there have to be an R&D component? Yes. I mean, R&D is well, yes and no. I mean, research and development. Development is, research is the earlier part, development is the later part in some ways. When some of the agencies like DoD have that directive phase 2, the NIH has a directive phase 2, and sometimes that really earliest stage feasibility of your wild, wacky idea, you've already done it. You already know it works, but there's other things and other levels of validation, other scaling it up to a larger, maybe more data sets or a larger audience, and there may be some other parameters that you have to investigate to see how they work. But for the most part, the biggest part's been proven to work on your own dime. But not all agencies have that. They don't all have that directive phase 2. So, it is really truly a scientific method of here's my idea. I don't know if it's going to work. Here's what I got to do to figure it out. Here's how I measure my results at the end of my project. So if I prove it, if it hits certain levels of success, then I know it's going to be feasible, mostly feasible. But if it go way under that, well, okay. And you get some of that levels of success of measurement maybe based on customer needs. If I can only make this thing so minimal of improvement that the current customers out there aren't going to change their whole supply chain just to save, 0.5% of some, something. But if I can change it, well, what's meaningful? Maybe 0.5% is a game changer for a $1 million instrument. They're going to be saving thousands of dollars. Maybe that is important. So it's in the eye of the beholder sometimes, but I think there has to be an R&D component. Company controlled research space. Can I use my own office for IT development, bring in potential workers as needed? This is a question that comes around a lot. What kind of space do I really need? And I look at it as a couple of things. If you have an ongoing company and you've got maybe a couple million in revenue and you got 10 consultants working on various federal government contracts, and you're all working from home, your headquarters is the owner's house. One of them has to be the headquarters. That's, maybe the government would be okay with that. But if you're proposing to develop, software and grow the company for another 50 employees, and where maybe you do need to have an office somewhere, or if you're developing actual technology, you're building a unit of something, and I need an office, or you're doing some lab research and you've got actual chemicals and you're going to be heating things up. You got to find the right space to do that, and it's typically not going to be your basement. That would not be, because it's got to be secure with a lock. And so it's agency and project specific, but also if you're a startup and you've got nothing, I suggest you try to do as much as you can to show that you are going to become a real company, have real resources and that traditional pathway to developing a company, to let them trust you that you're actually got the perceived plan of how to grow your company, right? And like I said, a lot of this would be a time of award, not a time of application. So, find a place you can rent an office at and you have your own private office and lock it. It doesn't hurt. There's resources here in Northern Virginia I know of, and at the PTAX, the Mason Enterprise Center locally has some new space that's got some affordable things, and we can help direct you some places. Let me hear. Nonprofits are not eligible. These are for-profit small businesses. I think I thought I had that there. If I apologize if that, I updated the presentation and I took out a slide that may have had that in there. But yeah, a not-for-profit. The government looks at nonprofits as not trying to solve giant problems with big market capacity to sell lots of things, to solve big problems, and to make money, right? That's the goal, is to solve the problem. There's other money for nonprofits. Some companies will set up a for-profit and a nonprofit, and they kind of have different focuses. I suggest talk to your a lawyer, or the Small Business Development Center maybe has some guidance on that. Maybe some counselors they have to help figure out the process to do a dual companies. For people, do they need to be on a payroll, or is it okay to have teaming agreements for sweat equity? Probably not. So maybe there's more to that question. You have to spend 66%, 66.33 in theory, of the funding in your company, right? So that has to be on the overhead, the indirects, the labor hours, the materials hours, and you have to have the PI has to be full-time employed at the company, and maybe they're 50% on this project. The other of their time, so maybe that's 50% of the funding you got. So you might have to hire with W-2s. They can be part-time, but they have to be W-2 employees. They can't be 1099s. You can have the other 33% can go to other contractors outside the company. again, to address the weaknesses that you perceive that the reviewers might have, to address, get the best team possible, you probably want to outsource some stuff. So you can't just outsource it all. No, it has to be money spent in the company. Type of industry does your business, doesn't matter. I mean, they're startups. I mean, they fund from medical to sensors to cybersecurity to chemicals to, I mean, the space stuff. I mean, the wildfire prevention tools and anything, right? So industry doesn't matter. You got to find the opportunities that you apply for. We talked about home office space. You can have home office space, we talked about that probably at length. So there's some, again, I think it's strategy, trying to impress don't do the minimum, look at what they asked you, but sometimes don't just do the minimum, do more, and it's allowable cost. So if you haven't had an office in a long time, maybe time to go out and rent one part-time. And to do some of the work there. And I would actually do it. If you do that, go to that office. Don't just get it and then do all your work from home. You want to develop a process. So, BAA is covering my questions. What if you are a prototype developer and designer? Well, I get similar questions. I'm an inventor, right? I'm an inventor. I'm inventing things. And how are you going to sell this? Are you ready to build a company? No, I'll just license it. Well, how will you do that? Well, I don't know. Well, you got to figure that out. I mean, I'm not going to just, with my great intentions for later on talking about that. Phase one, I want you to talk about all that. But what if you are a prototype developer and designer? Which source of help would be the best choice for me to be able to present the prototype to move forward? I mean, again, you have to look at becoming a real company that agency would want to do business with. Now, it depends on what the technical hurdle is you're overcoming, how many of those roles you really have to have on at phase one. But I'm going to have, we have to know about the market. I'm developing a prototype for what? For who? Why do they care? You have to have that customer discovery done. I'm saying maybe for an NSF SBIR, for example. So they'll know that there's a market there. Of course, you say there's a market. You'll say anything to get their money. But you want to have them show that you've talked to customers. We've done this discovery phase, and there's a gap in technology. There's a value proposition that customers would see if I can build this. Doesn't exist. I have to figure out if I can do this. Like I said, the early business development side of things, the SBD, Virginia Small Business Development Center Network, and via their ICAP program can help do customer discovery processes. The Procurement Technical Assistance Center is now called Apex Accelerators, help with procurement, finding government contracts. They're usually wanting you to be similar to Tommy's shop, to be a little bit more established before they can help you. They help you figure out NAICS codes and figure out, how to get your certifications for women-owned or minority-owned, when to do that, when not to do that. Make sure there's all kinds of resources there. Hopefully you're looking at that. EPA does have the SBIR, very small. Send me an email, and again, if you're a Virginia company, happy to direct you. Otherwise, go to the SBIR.gov website, find the EPA. There's some resources that are typical, some short webinars that you can find that have most of these speakers speaking, recorded webinars. You want to hear an overview of what they're doing, how they work, or maybe what other agencies, what you're proposing might be fundable at DOD. If it's EPA stuff, I mean, the DOD has more major chemical spills than any individual company. They fund a lot of cleanup remediation. NSF might have a fit. So there's a lot of agencies you could look at, but happy to chat with you about that. And the company has to be registered to do business in Virginia for us to provide funding to you. You can be, if your headquarters is here, you're going to have to be registered to do business in Virginia. So that usually requires a business certification. Someone talks about topics that are wired. This is where, so the DoD workshop we're giving, the DoD is infamous for, funding a lot of what we call, repeat offenders, meaning that they win a lot of awards because they're good at it. They understand the process. They understand what the government's looking for, and they can possibly suggest other topics, other problems. The government can't wire it. It's not, in theory, they can't wire it because that's illegal. Generally, they're not going to provide one phase one award. They're going to provide more than one, either 2 or 3, depending on the severity or the need of the topic, even more. And then they'll down select, they look at various approaches to the same problem and fund various approaches. So the workshop we've got coming up, they do a good job at explaining, and we do this in the webinars we give for DoD as well. How do you do a look back on prior awards? How do you look back at who might be other applicants that have won awards in similar areas with this particular agency to figure out, look at their companies and website and find out, are they doing the same thing I'm proposing? How different you have a neat, unique approach to doing something. Those are ways to kind of, figure out if you're a fit for being a good applicant, a go, no go decision, if you will. The government can't wire topics but the Lockheed Martin's proposed topics because they have gaps in some of the technology they've got programs for funding for. Small businesses can propose topics based on, hey, I understand your need. The new, and we'll talk about this in a second, the AFWorks open topics and the other open topics, that's, you're presenting your idea, right? And so it's not really wired. They say, oh, interesting. Oh, they want you to get a stakeholder interested from the Air Force in that. And that's not wired. It's like, yeah, we would want, let's see if this works. This would be interesting. So different ways to look at that. Certainly there are companies that win dozens a year across all agencies and have won hundreds of these over time, and they might be a 300-400 person company. You're competing sort of against these guys, but the agencies are first in line to tell you how many new applicants a year. Half of all awards go to first-time award winners, they say, something like that, give or take that number. But so it does get to new blood, so to speak. Do we need to own patents? You don't have to own patents. Having a patent strategy might be good at some agencies. Clearly, software, sometimes you don't really need to have a patent on that because it's maybe easy workarounds. But how are you going to make money on this, right? If you're so worried about someone stealing it, it's maybe patenting is a good idea. You don't have to have patents going in because the theory of an SBIR is I have an idea. A patent doesn't mean your thing works. I have a patent on this. Well, have you built it and it works? No, to the parameters that the customer you've talked about would actually buy it from you. We'll know. Well, do you know how to measure the success to see if they would buy it? Well, that's the phase one project. Is I have a patent on this. And we need to develop something partly, either maybe further from the patent, add other things to it, and that's what the money's for. So patents could be good, but it's all in the eye of the beholder what that means. And I think we're coming to an end here. Someone asked if it's, and I can't remember that, if it's tactical products as well. Technical, I don't know. Does it include actual? Not sure what that means. Sorry about that. So if there's any other questions, we've got kind of gone over time, and but I want to, again, Tommy, I'm going to thank you for your participation, and we will be sending this recording link out to everybody who's attended today, as well as the materials. We'll post those, and if you had access, and any questions, if you'd like to follow up with me, send me an email. Sometimes it takes me a few weeks to get back with everybody. if you need connections with some of our other programs here at VIPC or the other state programs I mentioned to you, let me know. I'm happy to provide introductions to the ICAP program, the SBDC program, the Apex Accelerator program, and forward you if you have Tommy, the Minority Business Development Agency, that he'd be happy to chat with you as well. But with that, thank you everybody for your time, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you out there in the future. Take care.